Hey, Soraya, here we are again. Back to
Uh,
back weeks.
Believe it or not, friends, we're here.
In real time, it's back to back days. But as far
That's
as but as far as the podcast. So speaking of back to back, last episode we talked to Stephen McCarthy and Greg Souders of the Long Riders about their Cherry Red release, High Noon Hymns. And speaking of Cherry Red Records, today we'll be covering this beauty. Released by Cherry Red Records, This Can't Be Today, American Psychedelia, and the Paisley Underground 77 through 88.
right.
So, should we bring Ronnie on for this one again?
Oh, I think we should.
Yes, we should. We should always have Ronnie when we can.
Whenever he says he wants to be a part of it, he's got a reserved spot. He's VIP.
Absolutely. If not, the two of us will hold it down.
That's true.
That's true.
That's true.
So, related to this, you think we should bring in an expert on this box set?
I think we need to bring in the compiler, the person who really kind of saw this all the way through. So thankfully, he's been kind enough to join us today. James Barber will be joining us to talk about this compilation released on Cherry Red in technically 2025, but it started being shipped in 2026. So, or at
And,
least in the US, it started arriving in 2026. I'll say it that way. But it's a three-disc set, and as the subtitle says, American Psychedelia and the Paisley Underground 1977 1988, which I think hits on a very interesting period of kind of that neo psychedelia movement here in the US. And for us, always the interest in the Paisley Underground. And there are some former guests of the show who are on these three disc set on this three-disc set, and some other artists that maybe you wouldn't have thought would be there, but they are. And I'm really interested to talk to him and understand more about how do you start to put together a bunch of artists for this, because there's a lot of material in that 11-year span, and but this focus on kind of this reimagining of psychedelia or reintegration of it, I think is really interesting. And for us, I mean, we always talk about, the fearsome foursome of Paisley Underground and all the kind of the associated Paisley adjacent
easily adjacent.
artists.
Yeah.
So I just think this is a huge task.
Yeah, yeah. And it was a task that I didn't realize the connection until I started reading the liner notes and the introduction by Pat Thomas, that it was the one that Pat Thomas had talked to us about 10, 12 years ago, that there was this four-disc Paisley Underground box set that had started. And I think that was the genesis of what became This Can't Be Today. Um, I don't know if James knows about that early part of it or if he got pulled in later. I'm curious how he got pulled into this
Yeah.
um, in the first place. And of course, with any compilation, Soraya, there's always, why is that on there? Why isn't this on there? So, yeah, there. I think what we would all have our own choice. And I think, in fact, Soraya, many, many, many years ago, we had a podcast episode where if we were to make a compilation, what songs would we pick? And I think we were very strict about what the Paisley Underground was. So
Right.
I think we picked three songs from each of the four bands, and that was our compilation, if I'm not mistaken. It was a
Yeah.
long time ago, but
Yeah. And I think we stuck very rigidly
we did.
to to what we understand the definition of pigs in the underground to be, which is, along the lines of how Danny Benair has defined it. This was a moment in time here in LA, and it was a scene here. But
Not a genre.
not a genre. But that being said, I think what this compilation does is kind of do what I think I think we have to, a little degree, which is kind of open up the discussion, at least, and kind of show how things are connected. And I think one of the things that gets reiterated, and we've talked about it often, are things like the connection with nuggets, nuggets and children of nuggets, and how that served as kind of like a springboard or like an inspiration. Not an inspiration, I think I wouldn't say that, but it's definitely something that connected a lot of people. Like, oh, yes, I know that. And other things mentioned in the liner notes are the connection with like Big Star and other artists or the garage scene, the unclaimed. And so there are a lot of connecting links that, really bring a lot of these artists to the surface. So either way, I think it's going to be a fun discussion. And, I think everyone's got an opinion, which is what's great, because we all love music.
Mhm.
And there's something that we love about all the artists that are on these three discs. So,
Absolutely. Yeah.
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 All right, Jeff, let's stop the gabbing and let's start talking with the people who know. Sound good?
Sounds good. Let's do
Let-
it.
Let's go. Hi, this is Soraya.
And this is Jeff,
Our podcast is called Paisley Stage Raspberry and Rhyme.
a podcast where the two of us play music that we like and share anecdotes and background about the tunes.
We hope you'll join our conversation. And without further ado, agruviar.
Let's get groovy.
Nice to hear. All right, Jeff. I say let's just jump into it. So, joining us today, our guest host extraordinaire, the one and only Ronnie Barnett, and joining us today to talk about this big old compilation, Jim Barber. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. Yeah, everybody, show your
There we
copy.
go.
Everybody
got
has
it.
a copy. Thank you. These are rare in the U.S. now, as best as I can tell. Jeff and I have talked about how hard it was for us to get our own copies.
Indeed. Indeed. I think Soraya and Ronnie had them like days after it was released, if I'm not mistaken. But
Yeah, I found it in a Free B Records in LA, so I actually bought it in a store, folks. It can be done still.
And I bought it from Cherry Red, and it came tariffs and all pretty early.
I was holding out for my promotional copies, and so I filed it. Dusty Groove in Chicago came through for me. Always have to give those guys a shout out when I can.
Awesome. Yeah, great plays. Jim, welcome and thank you for joining us. We do have a few questions. I know Ronnie wants to get into a little bit about your career in general, but
Oh, yeah.
but before we get into that, we definitely wanted to dig into this compilation. Um, I I love that it starts with the liner notes, and what surprised me with the liner notes is one of our former guests of many times, Pat Thomas, mentioned the fact that this has been something that's been in the works for, I think, decades. I think we heard about it maybe 12 years ago, Soraya, and it was going to be a four
Ish.
disc Paisley Underground type compilation. I did not realize that This Can't Be Today was part of what was germinated with Pat Thomas, it sounds like, from the liner notes. How did you get involved with this, Jim?
One of my old friends, Rob Tannenbaum, pitched um, Cherry Red on a CBGB box set, which that came out earlier this year. I don't know if you guys saw that one. It's
I
a
have.
really interesting box because it's a history of who played at the club. So rather than the 10 bands that everybody knows of, that like it gets into the real nitty gritty of what it was like to go to CBGB on a Wednesday night. So very broad group of bands. It's more of an historical record than these are the greatest bands that I've ever heard from Rob. But John Reed at Cherry Red said, "Hey, would you be interested in this side box to Rob because um, John's been trying for years." I said Griffin was going to work on it at some point, and Rob sent him to me, and I had the idea immediately, which is it's not just LA. This is something that was happening all over America with college radio stations. And if you're going to tell the story, you need to tell how it spread across the country and how all these bands influenced each other. And from that point, it still took almost 3 years because
Wow.
this is such a complicated set of clearances. and artwork, and everything about this thing has been really difficult because in the meantime, because when this got stuck, I made a hair metal box set, which
Ooh,
is all glam metal, which my and that this was really easy because it's all major label bands.
Okay.
yeah.
But we did this while the other one was stuck because
Oh
it's taken
wow.
so long. So I can't believe that it exists. It's hard to, but the guys at Cherry Red, I knew a little bit about licensing from my other career. And when
Yeah.
we got stuck with a lot of obscure bands that are on this, they let me go chase down a lot of stuff that nobody knew where to find it. And Pat, of course, was invaluable in assisting to get this done. He was incredibly generous with his time. We between us all, we still made some terrible mistakes, but we're overall really happy with what we did.
Yep. I just want to say, first off, how dare Pat take credit for this box and his liner notes? All right. Just kidding. But so,
Hey,
but second,
but I will tell, this would
yeah,
not have gotten across the finish line without his help.
no, no. We all love
Absolutely.
Pat. Yeah. No, but it more interesting what you said about it being easier to license major label uh, songs than these obscure songs you were trying to do here.
Yes. Well, part of it is the major labels are in a volume business. And,
Yeah.
when you take a standard royalty rate and divide it by 57 or 58 bands, there's not much there.
Yeah.
And, I find it really interesting. The Cherry Red box sets, I think you pay about $32 for a 3D CD set from them in the US.
Yeah.
Um, that's like $12 in 1990 money. Like these things are really cheap. They're really
Yeah.
inexpensive. They're really affordable. People do a lot of work on them, and there's not a lot of room for anybody to get rich. So
Yeah.
when you go to a band who's no one's talked to them in 40 years, you first have to explain to them hey, if you're doing this, it's going to help. You're going to be part of the story, and it's going to be cool. And you'll get some copies that you can share with your friends, but you're not going to get that cabin in the mountains you've been dreaming of.
Yeah.
Yeah. It blows my mind always when obscure bands are more hands on like that. Like they think they're getting ripped off or something and don't do something like
Well,
this.
but because bands do get ripped off.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
But
it's not an unreasonable, and in the rest of my business, I deal with a lot of artists who've been, and a lot of these artists on this box set were ripped off.
yeah.
So, you have to be really patient and generous with people when you approach them about appearing on something like this because I've been on all sides. I've been a manager, I've been a publisher, I was an A&R person at a record label, I was a producer, and I've seen people get mistreated every possible way. And I hope this has brought some joy to some of the people who've been included. That makes me really happy. Other people wish the story had been told a little bit differently. I understand how they feel too. But you do what you can.
Yeah. No, it's I think it's cool that you have psychedelic before Paisley. So it's not just seen as a Paisley, compilation.
Yes.
Because yeah,
That
it
was
really is
very
about that.
intentional.
Yeah, it really is like that golden age in the 80s where
Mhm.
a friend of mine, the bands like this, a friend of mine always used to say these were bands that got us through the 80s when all the other stuff went all, trigger drums and homogenize and stuff. This was like the good stuff, you know?
Well, and that's this, sometimes when people are fans of a genre that they didn't live through, they have very specific rules about what does and doesn't count.
Yeah.
And I hope that when someone listens to this straight through, they hear all the musical connections that are there. And that there may be bands on here who overall may not have been particularly psychedelic, but the songs that we chose for this collection really highlight how that influence was there and it's something that they drew on.
Yeah. Yeah. Personally, I love this set. I mean, this is my music right here. I mean, the if you're talking about college rock, I mean, if I were to name this, it'd be like American college rock. That's what I would call it, and then that encompasses like all of this easily. And everyone, what I love about this gem is that I love every single song on it, but there's a handful of these bands, even some that I totally should know that I don't know. Darius and the Magnets, who's from my area, San
Hmm.
Diego, and I want to compliment you also on the liner notes because you have a little paragraph about each band,
Thanks.
which helps me to understand who they are. But I'm exposed to some bands that I've
Totally.
had no idea who they were. So that's what a good compilation should do is like have songs that you enjoy, but also introduce you to music that you've never heard. So
Well, it's Darius was sort of my first pick for the whole my first draft round because that is the first record released by Big Time Records in America, and no one knows about it. So I don't know how many were actually pressed. The band never met the guy who owned the label, who I later worked for, and that was a if I didn't say it was a shady operation, Seth from Dump Truck would call up and yell at me, but it wasn't a character, and I don't know how that record came out. Um, and it's been in my collection since it came out because my friend, before I worked at Big Time, my friends worked there and I had a copy of it and I've just loved that record and no one knows it. It's, the least valuable rare record I can think of because no one knew what it was. And so that people can hear that for the first time makes me really happy.
I love it. Yeah, it's a great set of music. I love pretty much everything about it. And I mean, it's early. I mean, I've just got my copy, as you know, Jim, but in my opinion, it's probably one of the best or one of my favorite um, top 10 various compilation records. I mean, it holds up with, to me, Nuggets, Children of Nuggets, Radio Tokyo tapes, Wharf Rat, some of these great compilations. I think it's absolutely wonderful. I love the artwork on the cover. Like I said, the liner notes are great. Um, it would have been cool if the marijuana girl was a little bit bigger, but what can I complain about?
It's Callie, who people in the UK really know. He's the art director on this project, and I worked with him when he was at Island Records, maybe 30 years ago. More than that. Let's not do the math.
Yeah.
Callie designed the Driving and Crying Smoke album cover, and he was a huge fan of the band. But before that, he had helped start Strange Things Are Happening, the British fanzine, and Bam Caruso Records,
Oh,
which put out the United States of Existence album. So
another
I
one,
knew he
another
was
one I was,
connected to this music.
yeah.
And, he was a real bucket full of brains guy. And I
Yeah.
brought him in and, it was, he understood this music. I'm really happy with what we ended up with for art.
Ah, very good. Yeah, it definitely has an archival kind of feel to it, of course, which totally fits. So, can we get into the tracks that you picked and ones that didn't make it? If it were me and we were doing and Paisley Underground were part of it, I would have included Danny and Dusty, or Rainy Day, which you probably couldn't get licensing for even if you wanted to. Salvation Army, like those were three that I would have put on.
Salvation Army is a screw up because Pat and certainly myself and even John Reed all know Danny Benair very well. There were some communication issues between the licensing people and the people who look after the 3 o'clock catalog, which includes the Salvation Army record. It should be on there. It is the biggest mistake on the whole box set. And I have ask Danny, he'll tell you.
I'm sure he will.
Right.
I have no doubt about it.
Anything that's connected to David Roback that's not the first Rain Parade album is impossible to license. Um, if you guys know Pat, you've probably heard some stories.
Oh yeah.
I can confirm them all. So I wanted 2 songs from Rainy Day. I wanted Clay Allison. I wanted Opal.
Yeah.
And none of those are on there. And those are huge. I also couldn't get anything from Ace of Hearts Records. So No Help You In by Liars.
Oh
I wanted to put Trim 2 by Mission of Burma because that is a psychedelic song.
yeah.
And probably The Neats and Other
Yeah. The
Broken Dreams.
needs, of course. Yeah.
And so that we've hit several of the there's more obscure things that didn't make it on, but those are the ones that can't get records from SST. So I couldn't get 8 Miles High from Husker Du, which would have helped explain why Husker Du is on the box set to some people who don't get it a little better.
Yeah. Early Screaming Trees too would
Yeah.
have fit on this.
And there is a pre-SST album I tried to get. here. I did my homework here. I got everything pulled up. I, wa- I wanted to get I See Stars off Clairvoyance,
Yeah.
but we just couldn't pull that together. But yes,
Yeah.
um, you know, most of the SST bands from that era have gotten their masters back. That's how we got Meat Puppets.
Yeah.
Opal actually have their masters back, but it's not coming out again.
Right.
Um, couldn't get. I wanted to end the whole thing with Love Buzz by
Mm.
Nirvana but you can't get Nirvana.
Yeah.
Nirvana's not on the really excellent grunge box set that Mark Arm just did for Cherry Red, called "You're No Big Deal." It's really good, even though he included Australian art damage bands with the West Coast American bands. But there's no Nirvana on that. They just don't license.
Yeah.
What else is missing? I wanted a Chesterfield Kings B-side, because it sounded. There's a song of theirs called "A Dark Corner," which is the B-side of "I'm Going Home," and it sounds like the 13 Floor Elevators. You know, most of their stuff is really garage R&B upbeat, but there's this song that's really psychedelic. Um,
Yeah.
Electric Peace, do you know that band?
Yeah. Yeah. On
Wanted
Enigma.
them. Um, the Flies from Boston have an amazing cover of 2000 Light Years from Home. Couldn't track that down. Um, Brett Gurewitz put out a record as the Seeing Eye Gods, and it has some drum machines on it, but it's super psych. It's really
Mm.
good. It's a very early Epitaph record.
Yeah.
Um, and The Secret Side from New Jersey, A Hole Where the Pocket Should Be, great song.
Mm.
Secret Side with a Y, of course.
Very psychedelic.
Crystallized Movements from Connecticut, you know that band?
I'm not.
No.
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 It's sort of this weird psychedelic, almost hardcore crossover. These are the weirdo rare records I was determined to get to tell
Yeah.
people about, and you can't get everything.
Yeah.
Didn't get Dementia 13, but
Isn't
we
it
did.
amazing?
Susie Shaw was incredibly generous and gave us a huge amount of stuff from the Bomp and Vox catalog, and thanks so much to her for being helpful with that. That was great. Really helped make this work.
Yeah, I was very happy to see some of the Bomb stuff or Vox stuff on here. Telltale Hearts, The Things, Pandora's,
Yes.
some of the great stuff. So
Um, but this I'm very happy. You know, I managed a dump truck when I got out of school,
Mm.
and that there's a notorious story. It may have come up with you guys before, but the Hoodoo Gurus sued Big Time Records for unpaid royalties, and that's how all Red Cross and Dream
Mhm.
Syndicate and all these bands got their masters back,
Right.
because the Gurus were awarded all the entire Big Time catalog in the lawsuit in Australia. So Dump Truck got their masters back, and Kirk Swan is remixing Positively Dump Truck, and
Oh.
this version that's on this box, and it sounds to me, the record was really good. It did exactly
Yeah.
what they needed to do for them at the time, but this sounds like the band I used to see live in really good ways.
Yeah. Yeah. We should also mention too that the Hoodoo Gurus gave all those bands their stuff for free. Like they
Yes,
didn't charge them for these tapes. Yeah, which is amazing.
it's just one of the most righteous things they've ever.
Yes. Yes.
I saw Red Cross in Atlanta on last Friday, and
Oh yeah.
we always have to talk about it when I run into those guys.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. And Jim, I look forward to you making me a CDR of all those songs you just mentioned.
Yeah, I gotta.
And sharing it with the rest of us.
disc number 4, unofficial.
I'm just planting seeds here. That's all. That's all.
You know, somehow my copies of Crystallized Movements and Secret Side have disappeared from my life. They need to be. They're not. Those are not free out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But working on, yes, we'll have to have a private circle of. You know, I wanted to start after the last. I wanted the second track to be Bermuda by Rocky Erickson as a tie. Couldn't quite get that one over the finish line. But you know, there's this, and I wanted Pale Blue Eyes from REM instead of Gardening at Night. And I don't know how that happened, but again, I wanted to tie all that, put those covers throughout the whole thing to sort of tie the story together that I tried to tell in the liner notes.
Yeah, Pale Blue Eyes actually makes a lot more sense to me than Gardening at Night would, just because the Velvet connection. But Jim,
You're
you
not the first person to say that, but that's
asked. Yeah, that certainly makes more sense. And some of them, I was very surprised at looking through the track listing when that came out months ago. I saw Camper Van Beethoven, one of my top 10 favorite bands of all time. I'm like, Camper on this? And then I saw Circles. I'm like, Circles is perfect. I mean, that
Yeah.
is so psychedelic. And I've had two of my friends that had the box set 6 weeks before me said that they weren't even familiar with Camper, and this box set has turned them on by way of Circles. So good job.
it. And David lives in over in Athens. I'm in Atlanta, and um, that's a part of who he is. You know, they were really a lot more angular most of the time, but that one's just, and I'm a sucker for anything with a sitar or a fake electric sitar on it anyway. So
Yeah. I mean, you have that whole breakdown where it gets kind of raga-ish, and then and then you got the backwards chorus. I mean, that song is super psychedelic. So I'm hearing it
Yeah.
with the other tracks. I'm like, yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. Why
Uh,
wouldn't that
I'm
be on here?
I'm glad you got the Fans on here, Jim, because that's a band I've always read about and heard about. They never
you
made a record to my knowledge, right? Or did they make a
well,
seven?
there are tapes that have been floating around, and I will tell you that Danny Beard first gave me a, a sequence of an album in 1989, and
Okay. Yeah.
it's been going back and forth, and I think it's getting close.
That's
There are
37
versions
years
of,
ago, Jim. That's 37 years ago.
I think there are, I think there, and a lot of it's bedroom tapes and live stuff, but I think the album is
Yeah.
almost ready to come out, and I'm a little too young to have seen them,
Yeah.
but anybody in Atlanta, they always will tell me this was the band, this is the band from Atlanta, and finally, I hope within the year, will everyone will finally get to decide for themselves.
Well, since you actually, I wrote Sean at the shop, Sean, who works at
Sean
Wax and
Bourne.
Facts. Yeah. After I read your liner notes, he said, Fans, it is happening. So I don't know. He didn't give any details. But speaking of, since we're
We
talking about, go ahead.
I've had a Tony Paris, who I think a lot of people know from Atlanta. He used to be the editor of Creative Loafing. He managed Michelle Malone. Um, Tony has been working really hard on this, and it's not, again, this is one of those things where so many people have so much emotionally invested in
Yeah.
the history and the story of the band around here. It's a really hard project to finish
Yeah.
because you're only going to get to tell that story once.
Yeah.
And
Well, you got to get it done while people are around. I mean,
Right.
remember Tom Gray was working on the Brains reissue. I can talk. That breaks my heart. That's one of my favorite bands of all time. And Jim, I'm sure you know more about this than me, but yeah, he was getting that remastered and done, and then he sadly passed away. So
I strangely, Universal UK is interested in reissuing the entire Driving and Crying catalog on vinyl, and those guys, I'm still friends with those guys, and
yeah,
so everyone has been waiting for those records. Some of the records have been available never really been available on vinyl, so that's coming soon.
yeah,
But I'm hoping that I can hook up with the Universal UK people and say, hey, you have these two incredible albums in your catalog that have never even been on CD.
yeah, exactly. And
And
there's a hit song on it. Let's face it. There's a hit song on one of
there's
those.
a, yeah, Tom probably never liked to see me coming because I always was trying to plot some way to help to get that stuff to get out. We miss him.
Yeah,
I'm sorry he didn't live to see that.
yeah. No. Well, good to know that your things could still happen. So
Some of us care too much.
yeah. Off topic, but thank you for answering that.
It's all on topic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
Soraya,
had
was there anything that shocked you that was on here?
shock, no, because I think once I started, when I read through the liner notes, I started seeing the links between the songs. I mean, there were things that just struck me as odd, but as I understand the story that's being told here, it makes sense. But I did have a question. How did you come up with the cutoff of 88?
It seemed to make sense to me once you the scene seemed to be petering out a bit. Bands were starting to get signed in larger numbers. Um, I mean, I'll throw it back at you. Are there things from 1989 or 1990 that you think um, um, it just seemed that seemed to be that seemed to suggest itself as the cutoff point.
Okay.
Yeah,
And the follow-up I had to that is because you're much more familiar with the how this American psychedelia was looking on the East Coast. Because I know on the West Coast, we kind of saw that ebb and flow, and then, 88 seems like a logical cutoff, maybe perhaps a year or two earlier, even. But did was 88 really kind of where it was still kind of a something that you heard in clubs and you were seeing bands perform, and there was still this link to this kind of new iteration of psychedelia in 88, and that's where it stopped? Because here it might have been a little earlier. I don't I'm This is just an opinion, personal opinion.
I think the whole wearing vintage clothes and fringe jackets thing was probably over by like 86 or 87.
Hmm.
Right.
Swinging
But
medallions. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Turtleneck.
but I when I was working at Big Time and Dream Syndicate were on the label, they were as psychedelic as they ever were. Um, you know, if I hadn't focused on the early Dream Syndicate, I think there are psychedelic tracks on Ghost Stories, the record that came out in 1989. Um, and you know, to stretch it a little later, I probably could have gotten Mazzy Star since Capitol owns that and David Roback couldn't stop it. You that's to me and when you're telling the American story, you're also not telling the 4AD story, which was where a lot of these bands had a lot of crossover sonically with what was going on at 4AD, and which is why was happy to put. There's people who are really baffled by Ultra Vivid Scene on there. I think that would have been a little more apparent if Opal had been on the compilation. It's like I think there's a straight line from Rain Parade to Kurt and Ultra Vivid Scene. I think they're 100. He's 100% drawing from that well. Um, you, but there, I know there are some people who definitely saw it as the a dress up scene, as people who were it very much felt that way sometimes in New York.
Mm.
Um, you know, in the South, in Boston, in the Carolinas, it was more people mining sounds, but in New York, it was definitely a scene where people were reenacting maybe sometimes.
yeah, yeah. I saw some of that in San Diego and LA here. I mean, with bands like the Telltale Hearts and the Pandoras and some of the outfits that were being worn. And 3 o'clock definitely had their period, or that arrived without traveling period, where I would see them and Michael would have the big roughly um,
And
English.
those are and you're mentioning bands who had the substance to sort of that wasn't the primary attraction,
No,
but
music.
there were other bands where like it was clothes first,
Oh,
music second.
oh,
But
okay.
Fair enough.
you I know I have a lot of friends from Milwaukee, and Plastic Land were definitely the curators of every um, piece of clothing that had been sold in Madison and Milwaukee. I think they collected all of it from the thrift stores, and they had the greatest collection of stage clothes of any band. Or they only dressed in vintage.
Yeah. No, they would have like strobe lights in the studio apparently and stuff, like lava lamps. And I love Plastic Land, which leads me like they're one of the bands that has two songs on this. Them and the Rain Parade. Like, how did that happen? Where you
Well,
chose to
the
go with
court,
two
the
songs? Yeah,
Rain Parade, the Bangles,
Bengals.
Dream
Yeah,
Syndicate was supposed to be the 3 o'clock.
yeah,
Plastic Land. Those are like the torchbearers in a way.
yeah,
If this had gone to 5 CDs, it might have been two REM songs. Um, Long Riders have 2 songs.
yeah.
These are the core bands of the scene.
Gotcha.
Trans-
You hear that, Jeff and
Translator
Soraya?
and
I
Yeah,
heard
yeah,
it.
yeah. Yeah.
Translator and Wire Train, they each have one song that fits on this compilation and no others.
Yeah, yeah.
Reverbs have a couple. I love that EP. I think they on here twice. That EP is one of my all-time favorite records, period. Happy Forest. Such a great band. They were so jangly and catchy.
And Rick was so helpful in getting that and was so kind and generous with comments on this. It was like that's one of those records that I just played probably on every shift.
Yeah, so
It came
great.
out.
From start to finish,
Yeah.
that's a great EP. Ronnie,
Yeah.
we just have a few more minutes, and I know you wanted to talk more about Jim's um,
Yeah, yeah. Well,
daytime job, right? Or former daytime
first,
job.
first off, I just want to say 3 o'clock. You got Her Heads Revolving on CD because that album's not on. Actually, it is on out of print CDs. Now that I think about it,
Yeah.
but
Not easily accessible.
not
Yes.
easily accessible. Yeah, it's not. It's not streaming that out. A lot of that IRS stuff is not streaming or whatever. But yeah, Jim, 2 words for you: Chinese democracy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
we got to talk about it. Like people who don't know Jim, as he said, worked A&R at Geffen. He uh, managed the bands in the '80s, Driving and Crying. Big Time. What did you do at Big Time?
I kind of did. Actually, I learned production, meaning manufacturing, when I was at Big Time. I was the person who
Gotcha.
was in charge of mastering, getting the films together for the arts, dealing with the pressing plan. It was the greatest job I ever had because I learned A&R administration.
Nice. Deciding how much to get, how much to press too. Was that
Well, basically, RCA wanted the minimum.
right? Let's say like the
um,
turbines or something. Like, yeah, it's going to be.
but it was but before that, I'd managed Dump Truck and Christmas, which is why I had the relationship with the label. Um, yeah, but it somehow I got a reputation for working with the artists at Geffen that other people um, couldn't communicate with.
Gotcha.
So
That's a
I was
skill.
sent in. I was sent in to try to get Chinese Democracy out before Christmas 1998.
Now, how long had they been working on it at that point? Not 98, like so, like 8 years,
There were
something like
there
that.
were sessions that were involved Duff and Slash in 1995,
Okay.
and then they left. But they had blocked out a studio for 2 or 3 years at this point. Um, and Billy Howardell, was sort of the programmer synth guy on the project, and Josh Fries was the drummer
Yeah.
and guns. And since they spent so much time waiting for the lead singer to show up, they made a record and then got Maynard to sing on it. So the Perfect
Oh,
Circle record was made during the Chinese Democracy sessions for the most part.
wow.
Um,
And those guys were getting paid for those Guns N' Roses
I got to sign
rehearsals and stuff. Yeah.
I signed a lot of invoices, and it was an incredible, to think about the music industry at that point, sort of 97, 98, 99, it was at its absolute peak.
Yeah.
There was so much money being spent on that record.
Wow.
And, you know, Axel had an idea, had something in his head, and
Yeah.
he had trouble. He didn't have the people always around him who he could communicate it to. And it took
Yeah.
a really long time for him. He basically taught himself Pro Tools to make that record.
Wow.
And um, they play some of those songs live now,
Good.
interestingly. Um, I I wish it had come out before in the 20th century, because I think people would have taken it a lot more seriously. But um, it didn't. Came out 10 years after I left working on the project.
Oh,
Wow. It'd be a great box set, right? Perfect box set with like the original, I don't know, all the different mixes and versions
Oh my
and
gosh.
you know what I mean?
I think there were. I think it was definitely a situation where things were worked over with a lot of concentration for a long period of time.
Yeah.
And it's not like there's thousands of outtakes. It's like they were they were
Okay.
they were farming the same piece of land to get it exactly what they wanted.
Gotcha. Did you
So
an
I hear a
actual
lot of things on the released record that I heard 10 years before.
okay, that sounded exactly the same?
Yeah.
Wow. That you and Axel keep in touch?
No. But Axel has a very focused life, and when people
Yeah.
are in and around him, they're in, and then he, I understand.
Yeah. You did your best. You tried. So you had to answer to the bosses and say, I don't think it's going to happen
Well,
for
they
Christmas.
shut down Geffen in the middle of me working on that record.
Oh,
So my bosses were one group of people when I started working on it, and they were a different group of people at Interscope.
I see.
And that complicated things a lot. And Interscope definitely didn't have the patience for artists doing the approach that Guns N' Roses were trying to do at that point.
Right.
They thought they could get the record out of him more quickly. And
Yeah. Did you stay in the major label world after you left Geffen, Jim?
Interscope,
Or yeah. Oh, you
um,
went to Interscope after that. Okay.
right, and that didn't. I was replaced by the new Geffen head of A&R, a guy named Fred Durst. My job,
wow.
Yeah.
and look, a lot of us who came from this sort of artist first perspective,
Yeah.
um, the business really changed a lot, and those of us who had really taken that, no, it's like I was done with
Yeah.
labels. I went in. It was a miracle that I had a job at a major label because I'd come up from punk rock,
Yeah.
and I produced records for a long time. I left the business for a while, and then I found some startup companies that sort of lured me back in.
Nice. And Fred Durst was
Oh,
the
wow.
hatchet man for your major label
No,
career.
no. This does he was just my
Okay.
replacement.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Let's not. Good luck to all bands, as Orc
I,
Boy used to say. On stage. Um,
agreed.
All right.
so
Well, it looks like
if anybody, I'm writing about This Can't Be Today on my Substack, which is called Stars After Stars After Stars.
Okay.
And I'll be going into some more detail about the licensing challenges in a post that'll probably go up about the same time this comes out. And I write about a lot of music business contracts and licensing and copyright stuff for people who don't understand how that stuff works. I try to explain it to musicians because I seem to have a talent for that. And
um,
Wonderful.
awesome. Well, it looks like
I'm
we
going to
got
share it with people.
less than a minute. We thank you, Jim, for coming on. I thank you for making this happen. This can't be today. I'm sure most of our listeners have this compilation, but if you don't, you need this. You definitely need this. Again, thanks, Jim, for coming on and
Yeah.
explaining a little
Thank
bit
you
how
so
it is.
much.
With
It went
any
quick,
comp.
Jim. We didn't even get to talk about sequencing.
Oh, yeah.
I'm
Sequencing this
available
beast.
anytime.
Okay.
Mostly chronological. We'll leave it at that.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Very
Nice to
good.
meet you,
Thanks,
Jim.
guys.
Yep.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Sorry,
That
Soraya.
was insightful.
Yeah. So we had a lot of questions about how this came together, and I think Jim really helped us
Yeah.
to narrow down what this is about. Yeah, I mean, with the title, American Psychedelia and Paisley Underground, 77 through 88, it conjures up certain things, and not everything on here was definitely jumped out to me, but it makes more sense to me now after having this conversation.
Good, Jeff. Good.
That's okay. No, of
I
course
just
you
want to
can.
say Jim is fantastic. I love meeting him and talking to him, and Yeah, obviously we could do multi-parts just on his career, not just this box. So
Oh, by all means, yeah. This is just this seems like a hobby compared to all the other stuff that,
I know.
right.
yeah.
Go get it and enjoy the music. And yeah, it all works. It all links together.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Don't
Um,
don't think it was just Paisley like
Yeah.
some podcast might try to do.
how dare
Yeah.
you, sir, bite the hand that feeds you.
Yeah.
But anyways, all right, mi gente. I got nothing else to say. That was really good. Mi
Yeah.
gente, a grubiar.
Grew on Paisley people.
Agreed. Oh,
Look at you.
I know. Sorry, I got the bad angle today. It's okay. I'm not vain anymore.
Hello.
Hey, James.
Hello.